Winona and Paul here. We're hanging out. How you guys all? Good? On Madeline Island, our homeland. We're happy to be up here, and we come up here for a little time to reflect as Anishinaabe people in the center of our known universe. And also, we had Honor the Earth benefit here last night. We actually have a couple days of this, and so the board co-chair and me are here. And I just want to catch up with you, Paul, because you're a fast-moving guy.
Okay, you have. No, go to it.
Okay.
What are you doing? What are you doing up here this time in particular? Let's date this and
okay.
Get
So
it on
this
the
is
record.
August 21st. No, August 20th.
August 20th, the day after.
The first of the Honor the Earth birthday party Madeline Island benefit concert events, which I think we're in about our 9th or 10th year, and we're super honored that Tommy's Burn Down Cafe is letting us bring in some fabulous musicians. Last night we heard the Good Sky Boys showed up, Akumatu. Amazing Inupiat
Yep, Allison.
rap artist with her caribou and polar bear rap, just astounding, amazing. And she's going to be going actually out with us to these communities. We got some things coming up after this. And then in addition to that, we had Chastity Brown show up, and I would say knock it out of the ballpark.
Yep.
With some over-the-top, someplace between Joan Arm Trading and Tracy Chapman. I don't know how to describe that woman.
That's coming off the ferry over onto the island, and walking into a venue and picking up the guitar and singing and just doing some wonderful music on behalf of support for Honor the Earth and all the other activities.
Yeah, and she's a major driving and new emergent force in Minnesota, so we're really honored to have her. And then tonight we're going to be joined by a Sister Tree. So some young musicians, and Honor's always had a long tradition of working with musicians and artists because that's some of the beauty of this movement, huh?
Well, I think it is. I think the partnership between musicians and environmentalists and the ties are really close, and you find them all over the place. In fact, I think that's kind of a segue into this whole idea. If you're going to be fighting battles, you need to be able to have your entertainment factions. You need to be able to take some time off once in a while. You need your fry bread. You need to be able to sit down and have a conversation in communities, even with those people that you disagree with. And a cup of coffee and some food and some time to get out of the battlefield, I think, is essential to making ththese things successful.
A couple of thoughts on that. You and I are kind of, I gotta say, old warriors at this, Paul, but we've been at this a while where we've, I heard Bob Shimmick say one time that I have more winters behind me than I have ahead. Unless I live to be well into the hundreds, it is likely that I've been around a while, and we've been at this a long time, and it's been a good life, but somehow, we're still here. And as everybody, I think a lot of people do know, I did have a little horse incident a couple weeks ago, but and you've had your share of those things.
Lesson learned.
Lesson learned. Don't do that again. But, having said that, I think you're talking about some of the essence of sustainability and durability in a movement, which is, we did have a ceremony. You were able to do that for me here. We had a jingle dress, ceremony when we come in. And then in addition to that, that jingle dress ceremony, our ceremonial practice, our cultural feasting, right? Our music to fill our hearts with something that is beautiful.
And a feast that was filled with things that would have been and came from this region. We had bison, we had deer meat, wawashkeshi, we had manuman. They're beginning to harvest now a little bit. People out there checking the rice beds, and in some places it is falling at the very top of the stalks. A sustenance staple food with a deep spiritual name called Minomin, the good seed, and which guided the vision of the Anishinaabe here. And you go down the list of other things: ancient squash, hominy corn, beans, all those nutritious things that would have been something that would have been brought to this island historically and perhaps for a couple thousand years, as far as we know, which makes it really enjoyable to come back to the island here and visit. There's an essence that heals and reinvigorates, and when you get done here, you're ready to go do battle.
Right. So I want to just reaffirm that to the Anishinaabe listening: is come home to our island. Let us make a place here that is larger and larger, so that we have a place to retreat to do our ceremonies and look at our Great Lake here, because a lot of this is also about the greatest body of water in the world, and how to keep it the way it is. So, there's a lot of things I want to talk about, Paul, but I just want to, you are coming out of a pretty much prolonged, was about an 8-year battle on the Pinocchis.
Well, the really turning point was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and that was when, even though we didn't know that, it seemed to me that there was a whole well-directed plot to try to change Wisconsin's law. And the battle has been successful to this point with one of the major richest players, the Klein, Chris Klein, his investment group, deciding that they're going to pull out of that project in the Pinocchis and call quits to it. I think about a week ago, the least options to purchase the minerals expired. Interesting enough, the LaPointe Mining Company, and here we are on the edges of LaPointe, Wisconsin, on Madeline Island in Lake Superior, and on the village of LaPointe, of which this mining company was named and formed, and really formed out of 260 Indian allotments, both Sioux script allotments, 160 acres. Those were the loyal Dakotas, John Trudell's great-great-grandmother. A half-breed or mixed blood that attempted to get a Sioux script allotment up in the Pinocchis, along with a whole bunch of Chippewa 1854 treaty.
This is where the mining claim is based on?
Well,
a lot of that is encumbered in the mining claim.
The LaPointe Mining Company, which is fully owned, and it's a chunk that sits within the Condon family estate. U.S. Steel as some when there exist. Totality, as it did in the late 1800s when these allotments were stolen or manipulated out of
these
the hands
guys
of
coming
Indian
in
people.
for a new? Are these guys coming in for a new push to get that? Because I heard that there's some other interest.
GTAC isn't. GTAC's out of the picture. That
GTAC move on. They said that was a stupid
investment.
idea. They're gone. Too much resistance.
Gogebic Taconite LLC formed to potentially mine this deposit, or at least to build a mining permit in a project that could be sold to someone else. They're out of the picture. They were backed by David and Charles Koch, money that went into local elections and all kinds of other things. They're out of the picture, but LaPointe seems to be shopping this thing now. They're saying it's inevitable. It's inevitable that there will be a mine. Well, last week there was a scientist that came forward and says inevitably, if they mine the area, there's going to be asbestos fibers, there's sulfuric acid.
It's going to destroy the ecosystem.
Sulfides. It's a danger to the watershed. The tribes have said it's not going to happen. I think that's probably what's going to happen, is because you have this extreme opposition by people who are concerned about protection of the water quality, protection of the air quality, protection of the resources in the ceded territory, including Manoomin, the Min, the good seed, which was a main staple. That success by utilizing harvestable treaty rights and just being there. I mean, they spent over $100,000 trying to find out what to do with the Indians, asking attorneys, what can we do with these Indians? They're up there fishing and hunting, gathering wild rice, picking wild onions, taking strawberries, tapping maple trees. Oh my God.
They're doing things that Ojibwe's do.
Over $100,000 to ask lawyers to say, is there any way we can get rid of these pesky former co-owners? And say, no, they're not former co-owners. They are co-owners.
Okay, and so the GTAC proposal of Pinocchis is in the 1837 treaty area. And now what we're seeing unfolding here in Minnesota, a little bit to the west, is the 1855.
The area that you can't rice.
Right.
You're not allowed to go
Right.
gather wild rice.
Interestingly
and feed your
enough,
family.
that the
Nope,
courts
can't
have
do it.
upheld our rights within the 55 and the initial stages of them, but of course the 37 was litigated all the way to the Supreme Court in the Mille Lacs case, and now we're looking at the 55 and the new proposals for mines, including the Tamarack mine of Kennecott and Rio Tinto Zinc, as well as the new proposals for the pipelines all across the 55. And so the Ojibwe have always maintained, as we should, that our ancestors made agreements with other people's ancestors, and those were our treaties, and in those treaties we said we're going to continue our usual and accustomed harvest. The 1855 Treaty Authority, put together by the bands and traditional people.
Not a thing was said that says, oh, we're going to allow you to degrade the environment or the food chain.
We didn't say that in the agreement.
That wasn't in the agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the thing. So we're saying we're going to continue to harvest as we have, and the state of Minnesota is now telling us to cease it, that they're going to arrest us. And so I'm thinking this next week, 25th, 26th, 27th, particularly the 27th, I think that the state of Minnesota is going to have to decide if it wants to arrest Indians for ricing, for taking our rice in the 1855. And it'll be interesting to see what the state of Minnesota wants to do, and why would they do that? Why would they do that? Why would they arrest Indians for ricing? What are you thinking on that?
Well, it's because if you go out there and rice, you might actually get right over that tract of land where that oil line might be and get really angry that they're even thinking about putting tar sands or a fracking oil pipeline through there that could destroy thousands and thousands of pounds of wild rice and pollute the fisheries. You got the new pipelines coming across Minnesota into Wisconsin. Line 5 goes across the Bad River Reservation to the Mackinac Bridge. I think it goes down to Kalamazoo, Michigan, where there was a huge spill. You got Pipeline 61 through the Lacutere Reservation, or right next to it, all the way down
That's
to
a big one.
Indiana. They're trying to pump that thing up to pump this thick goo that sinks to the bottom of rivers. It
Dilbit.
doesn't float. And so what you're doing in Minnesota in terms of confronting regulatory authorities and saying you want to protect the environment is connected to Wisconsin and the lines that come through it. It's connected to our consumption. It's connected to the pollution of Cree lands.
Well-
It's connected to fracking, environmental dangerous activities with chemicals in Colorado and Montana and everywhere else. So what are you guys going to do about it?
Well, I mean, this is kind of the thing I find ironic, is that the state of Minnesota says it wants to arrest Indians, but the state of Minnesota doesn't seem to be too concerned about oil spills. They want to arrest Indians for harvesting and feeding our families, but doesn't want to, I find that super ironic, in this day and age that the Indians are the problem, So I feel like we're going to continue doing what we always do as Anishinaabe. And while you talk about the states, I think one of the things that is emerging in the Ojibwe politic that certainly interests me is this Anishinaabe Federation.
Yes.
Because we're all one. That states is superficial borders that are, not that, and the implications of every one of our tribes making a decision affects every one of our other bands, and and in the case of these mega projects or whatever it is, it's Anishinaabe Federation business. It's Anishinaabe business for all of us, because it's not one band's problem or one bland, right?
And coming to a consensus may not always be that easy, but it seems to me that the jurisdiction of the tribes was retained through these treaties, not as individual bands, but you'd say collectively. The resources aren't for one band or another to harvest and to oversee and to administer over. They're for everyone, and so those are definitely issues that have to do with joint jurisdiction. But everyone coming together on these environmental issues seem to be collectively agreed upon that they need to be jointly protected. So you see a lot of overlap with tribal people coming into Minnesota for these protests. The question is are not only the potential pollution of the communities, but are our communities even ready? Are we ready for an oil spill potential on Lake Superior? Are we ready for an oil spill? Have any of these communities been ready for an oil spill? Are the fire departments, emergency technicians up to par to try to handle an explosion in a community like we had in Quebec a couple years ago? Where
Lac Mégantic, that was the bomb trains. I think that it's not just a tribal problem. I think it's a national problem. We got a D in infrastructure.
Exactly.
And you got crumbling rail lines, you got crumbling bridges, you got pipes leaking, you got millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars just in like Boston and New York in gas main leakage that's not even getting to consumers. And they want to build brand new pipelines and they got leaks everywhere. It's kind of like that whole old thing that, I try to tell my kids is you got to clean up your old mess before you make a new mess. And in this case, the new mess that they want to make is not only a hyper danger to our ecosystem. Enbridge Company says it will not respond to a spill within 60 hours. They won't stop a spill within 60 hours. It took them 17 hours at Kalamazoo. They thought they were misreading their figures, and in fact it was a local person, that 911 did it a number of times, didn't get that.
Right.
So we're nowhere
and
is
just
ready
for
this.
clarification, what it was is the alarm system within Enbridge went off and said there is a spill going on, and someone says, "Oh, it can't be that." And hit the repump button or whatever it was and recharge it, maybe even turn up the pressure, which they can do, thinking that it was some kind of an air bubble. And how many hours was it?
17 hours.
17 hours of oil flowed out of there. Those are the kinds of things. The recent disaster in Arizona, the Navajos are again paying a price for old mining waste. The mining company is long gone. They made millionaires. They're out of town, and it's going to be taxpayers that are going to clean up that mess. There was this huge flurry accident up in Canada last year. These are examples that exemplify the fears of our elders and what could happen in these incidents. So I want people to know where they can get information. Give us some URLs.
Yeah, www.honorearth.org. If you go on our website, we have a lot on this, but it's time for tribal governments. I feel like as tribes ourselves, or tribal governments, it's time to regulate. It's time to do this. If you're waiting for the state or the feds to regulate and protect you, in fact, there's no abandonment regulation nationally. That's a pretty interesting anomaly. Abandonment technically means it's not clear who has jurisdiction. The pipeline company can walk away. So who's in charge of, this gaping toxic mess that Line 3 is going to be? So we're way behind in our regulations for the present state of crisis, let alone the future state of crisis. And I feel like tribal governments, we're coming out of a lot of historic trauma, but we got some jurisdiction on some issues. I'm looking at, we spent a lot of time on NIGA, National Indian Gaming Act. Right. We spent a lot of time on trying to begin repatriating our people.
Spending a lot of time on the issue of whether we ought to go into business, selling marijuana or allowing it for medical use on reservations. When you talk about Chippewa Federation, you're talking about casting a huge regulatory net that's going to take some time, just like with this issue over growing hemp or growing marijuana or allowing its use for medical use, of which there's numerous referendums going on now in Indian country. There needs to be an intense regulatory authority within growing, farming, distributing, selling, possessing. In the same way, there needs to be, seems to me, to be a comprehensive environmental approach to air quality, air, water. It just doesn't work for one tribe having air quality regulations or two tribes in northern Wisconsin. It ought to be all those Chippewa tribes, as you're talking about, federation kind of approach.
We should share our legislative and regulatory strategy and not pretend we're little fiefdoms unto ourselves.
Clean water and clean wild rice is universal.
I'm seeing that
and
over in Leech Lake, and Leech Lake is needs to address the fact that they already got a Superfund site. They never got that fixed up, but now they're going to have more. And they need to find the stamina inside their own community to stand up, because if they don't stand up, then they're going to affect the rest of us. Okay. That's the way it is. But let's segue into this other discussion, because we've talked some about the problems, and there are many, because industrial society and capitalist society and this end of the fossil fuel era is, it's obviously super full of a lot of bad ideas. And one of the things I think about is I was reading this article in Harvard Magazine about Mara Prentice, and she was talking about how she's a super physics professor there. She was talking about the combustion engine and the energy revolution, and why it is inevitable that we transition from a fossil fuels economy. That's the basis of her argument, and the basis of her argument is found in the fact that your car is only 16% efficient. And so you put in 6 gallons of gas and only 1 gallon moves your vehicle. And that, compared to a 65% efficiency from a electric engine, is a pretty marked difference. And you can power an electric engine off of solar, and you can't power a combustion engine off of, you can power a combustion engine off of hemp. But the efficiency question. So I'm looking at the fact that fossil fuel era needs to end. I don't feel like our tribes are ready for it. I don't feel like, I think we become addicted. We're addicts, to fossil fuels in our tribal economies. But we're the least addicted of any part of society, because we just got propane. Some of us still got wood stoves, right?
And some of us are just getting diabetes, so we can reverse this stuff with food self-sufficiency and segue into all the others. You're talking about gas consumption and so forth, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's interesting. Henry Ford created a whole body of a car out of hemp fibers, and he used the oils within the chambers of the engine and the crankcase and everything else. So he was a great business person involved in the use of hemp oils. So again, segued into that, and all of a sudden I thought, well, gallon of gas is going for what, $2.77 a gallon nowadays, and I just sold a gallon of Pinokie Gold Maple syrup for $100. We're in the wrong business, people. We should be tapping trees, not worried about fracking oil.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it, because I have a quandary I find myself in my instructions, because I know fully that here I am trying to keep the oil off of the lake and keep the oil out of our territory, and I see that coming our way, and I had a lot of dreams about that. But then I was also told, to work just on those renewables because we need to be ready. And so I'm hoping over the next couple of years to really increase that because, our tribes need to be in the next place. We need our next economy. So, just a couple of thoughts on that. I've always maintained that just because you inherited a dysfunctional economy doesn't mean you got to carry it forward. And so if you want to keep trying to figure out how to shuffle them federal funds around and figure out how to work in these regulations and these exclusions and these processes that protect multinational corporations and not tribes and wait for the federal government to give you a pat on the back, you're going to perish. Let's be honest. We're going to perish if we wait for them. So
what are you saying?
I'm
plant your seeds?
I'm saying plant our seeds, grow our food, exercise our jurisdiction, protect our rights, have our own renewable energy, have some microgrids in our communities, pull authority, from these rural power you can get 0% financing from rural co-ops. Every tribe should have its own rural co-op to finance their renewable energy microgrids, right? Every tribe should have a local food economy to produce our own food and ensure that our rice is forever, and market the extra of it, whatever there is at a premium. Every tribe should have our own food self-sufficiency. Every tribe should not be waiting around figure out how to get their last 3 houses from HUD when we need to be building houses for our community.
Courthouses, energy efficient houses, earth houses.
Cordwood houses, the whole thing, because that other stuff's crazy.
The Mandan had it down a long time ago.
Yeah,
These
I want a
houses
house I
are
could
earth
put my
houses.
horses in.
Yes.
I'd do that, put my favorite 4 horses in the other side of my house. I'd do that, even if I'm a little mad at one right now.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Was it true that your father told you to learn how to grow corn before you talk about tribal sovereignty?
No, he just said, no, you're mixing 2 quotes.
Okay.
The main thing is my father said you're a super smart woman. He said you're a very intelligent woman, but don't want to hear your philosophy if you can't grow corn.
There you go.
That's what my dad said. Sugar Bear Smith
You
said
heard
you
it
can't.
straight from the
That's
mouth
me.
of the person the horse
And I'm a
dumped.
corn grower. I'm
Oh
a
my
corn grower. Yeah. Oh, that's it. And then the other thing I want to say is that my dad also said, but Sugar Bear Smith who said I don't want to talk about sovereignty.
Yeah.
If you can't talk about sovereignty if you can't feed yourselves.
There you go.
But let me just talk briefly about the marijuana and hemp issue. Now, I understand that on August 19th and 20th, the Menominee Reservation held a referendum, and that was a referendum which is a non-binding but advisory referendum for the Menominee Legislative Council. And that referendum was...
Second one in the state of Wisconsin, second tribal referendum. Go ahead.
Okay, so tell me about it. You're the guy from the eastern part of our territory. So the Menominees...
Red Cliff had a referendum of tribal members. There are tribal members that are petitioning for a referendum at Bad River as well. Hopefully they want that on the ballot at some point. Red Cliff said yes to medical marijuana. They said no to recreational use. We don't have the total vote totals, but it looked like about 80% of the voters on the Menominee Nation voted in favor of authorizing, whatever it might be, the legislative process or the legislature now to move forward on legalizing or regulating medical use of marijuana. Like I says, again, the referendum asks a question, but there's a lot to be done yet. And it also authorized by about 80%, and then I think it was about 65%.
No, maybe closer to 65 or 70% looked like it was in favor of recreational marijuana too, huh?
So.
Yeah, and so I want to talk about that because I think that we are a little bit in danger of this whole idea that, casinos were the answer and now marijuana is the answer. And I don't actually agree with that. I think you need a diversified economy in every tribe.
Because in some cases, the casinos... What they did is led tribes to be very dependent on that economy. Now that infrastructure, you got roads, you got electrical bills, you got all kinds of expenditures that didn't exist before the advent of the casinos.
And I'm going to be out and out honest. I'm super grateful to the casino economy. It's been very helpful, in a lot of our work. But at the same time, I think that it's really important to not. I don't believe that is the goal. I did not raise children. I did not raise my children for them to go around
and be a blackjack dealer.
I wanted to, I raised children that are conscious Anishinaabe, that, if it is a place for employment, for part-time employment, so you can continue to harvest and be your person, that is a good thing, be the Anishinaabe person. So I think that
And tribes ought to have that flexibility for people who harvest to have time off to do rice and to do sapping of trees.
Yeah, because you need some cash income to supplement your harvesting income as and in the present structure. So I think it's fine. But back to the marijuana question, like I feel like that, a couple of things on that. One, I looked at some studies on, I did some studying on white earth, and I figured that, if we're spending, 100 grand a month or 200 grand a month on importing marijuana to our reservation, that's a pretty large drain.
That's within the recreational use center.
The
It doesn't include all the bales of binder twine that we import from countries because there's a ban on industrial hemp, which is part of this whole discussion as well.
Yeah, so to me, like the loss of that drain in your economy with a local, if you could produce for your own use, I think you'd have a substantial increase in gardening interest, in our communities if people were able to do that. But, so I think there's that. Not losing money.
And I think that from my perspective, the most important thing to keep in mind is the discussion about hemp having to do with jobs. Industrial hemp doesn't have any active ingredients that get you high. Let's get that discussion out of the way and let our farmers grow hemp and be able to sell the oil and seeds and other things for viable products in the United States. That was attached to the Controlled Substances Act by the cotton industry because they were concerned about it taking over the fiber
coolness
economy.
Of hemp.
Well, it was a corporate interference in terms of wiping out the ability of hemp to compete for things just like cotton t-shirts. Hemp t-shirts last 10 times longer. But let's get to the other issue, which I think is more important. That's nutrition and medical capabilities in our community before we talk about recreational. I think we need to allow people to have a full spectrum of medical capabilities, whether it's seizures or Parkinson's disease or loss of appetite during cancer or these little kid seizures that are using oils now. Those are medical applications that every community should have. The tribes should be able to move right ahead and be able to work with the medical industry in other countries that is way beyond the ability of the United States in terms of the ability to be able to look at this and say, Israel has 158 different patents on medical and industrial uses of cannabis-based products because they've been researching it and they find value in it. Those things ought to be available to the medical community. And the whole issue of decriminalizing and getting people out of jail is even more important. See, the idea that someone can go smoke some pot and for recreational purposes is probably the least of the arguments, even though you brought up the economy one, saying, hey, how much money is going out of the economy?
How much are we draining? A couple of thoughts, because I know that our show's got to come to an end here, but I think that you and I'm in support of legalization. I'm in support of, regulation. I am in support of having local growers and maybe tribal processing or to figure that out. But I don't think the tribe should grow it in every case. I think that, the tribes, people in our communities need to be able to grow their own. But so that's kind of what I'm thinking. How are you thinking on that?
Well, I'm a business entrepreneur, and the more things that stay out of the hands of tribal government, and my estimation gives people the best fluidity to be able to get into business and hire people and those kinds of things. I'm in favor of legalizing hemp. I'm in favor of legalizing all medical uses. I'm in favor of decriminalizing, get people out of jail, let's get them some mental health care. I'm in favor of legalizing recreational use and taxing that within our communities for mental health care, for law enforcement, for the methamphetamine and the heroin and other addictions to opiates that we have in our community, making sure that our Vietnam vets, if they have post-traumatic stress and if a joint once in a while helps them sleep at night without nightmares, that seems sensible. Doctors are saying that's the possibility. We ought to get the regulations out of the criminal justice system and let doctors do what they need to do. And it doesn't need to be all controlled by tribal government. It just needs to be controlled by native entrepreneurs, just like other things are. There's a role for tribal government in the regulatory scheme, in the taxation scheme, but they don't need to own and operate everything on a reservation.
So Paul DeMain, I just want to thank you for your thoughts on this, because you're a guy who's got a head above a lot of things, and you're thinking about stuff and observing it, and I'm really grateful.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday. She just had another birthday. She's getting gray. She can go to the front of the line.
I got my elder's card at White Earth. Rocking. And that's how they do it. I just love talking to Paul.